What I want to do this week is continue what we looked at last week in Psalm 6 and begin to unpack it a little bit more. If you remember last week in Psalm 6, we had two practical things we came away with. The first one was all of us are going to go through dark times. We're all going to have times of, if you want to use the word depression, anguish, whatever you want to call it, we're all going to have times in our lives where we experience times like that. But the takeaway in the sermon in a single sentence, and you'll see it on the screen, the takeaway from the sermon in a single sentence is, in the darkest of times, we can trust God's heart. And David showed us that. David felt like in Psalm 6, he felt like God wasn't even there. That, in fact, he asked God to return to him in his prayer in Psalm 6. But he felt like God wasn't even near, but yet he knew he could cry out to Yahweh, the God who keeps his promises. And so that was the message last week. In the darkest of times, we can trust God's heart. But I basically gave you two doctrinal statements to learn that we could learn, but I didn't give you a lot of practical application to those two truths. And so this morning, what I want to do is, one of the people I mentioned in the message last week was Elijah. I used him as an example of someone else that experienced dark times in his life, and he did. But yet this guy was a godly prophet of God, obedient to God and powerful prophet of God, but yet he experienced a great time of depression in his life. And so I want to unpack that a little bit. And after we unpack what happened in his life and what God did in his life, then I want to give you three things we need to stop doing and three things we need to start doing when we experience times of darkness. All right? So let's talk about Elijah for just a moment. I mentioned he's a prophet of God. Elijah was God's prophet at a time when a guy named Ahab was the king of Israel. And Ahab was an evil king. He did evil in God's sight, Scripture says. And he married a woman named Jezebel, who was even worse than him. She was a godless woman. And they worshiped the Baals, the false gods. And she had 450 prophets of Baal. They also worshiped the Asherah. They had these prophets of Asherah. And this was going on. And God raised up Elijah to deal with this. Elijah went and spoke to the king and said, it's not going to rain except by my word. And so there was this time of drought. And so the king Ahab hated Elijah, and he's after him. He's looking for him. Never does find him. But finally, Elijah comes to him, and there's a whole lot. This is in 1 Kings, by the way, around chapter 16, 17, 18. We'll be looking at 19 in just a second. And so all this is going on in his life. And so Elijah makes himself known to Ahab, comes back where he can see him, and he says, Ahab, I want to challenge you to something. I want you to get the prophets of Baal, all 450 of them, and the prophets of Asherah, 400 of them, and meet me on Mount Carmel. Elijah felt like he was the only prophet of God left. And so he's going to meet him there. It sounded like a good idea to Ahab. And they meet on Mount Carmel. It is a beautiful, beautiful picture from God's word. And so they meet on Mount Carmel, and Elijah said, here's what we're going to do. He said, let's get 2 oxen. You guys, all you prophets of Baal, you take one of the oxen, you slaughter it, and you put it on an altar. You build an altar to your gods, but don't put fire under it. You put it on the altar, and you pray, and you ask God, your gods, to come and consume the sacrifice. But you can't touch it. Your God has to do it. And I'll ask my God to do the same, and we'll see which God is the real God, the one that answers by fire. And it sounded like a good job or a good idea to everyone that was there. Let me read you what happens. First, the prophets of Baal, he says to them, you guys go first. You guys go ahead and get your best shot at this. And so they put their ox up on the altar. They start screaming and crying to their gods, false gods. And they scream all the way till noon, crying out to their gods, and nothing happens. And Elijah begins to taunt them. Remember, he just one of him, there are 450 of them. And the people of God are there as well, the children of Israel. But he begins to taunt them. Hey, shout a little louder. Maybe your gods are asleep. Maybe they've gone on a trip. Maybe they've gone to the bathroom. I mean, he is putting the needle in them. And this goes on. They're cutting themselves. They're screaming and yelling to their gods. Nothing's happening. This goes on to early afternoon, and Elijah says, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, stand back, guys. Just stand back. And he takes the ox that he slaughtered, puts it on the altar he's builds a trench around the altar, puts stones there, 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel, and has everything there prepared. And to show the power of God, he has them just douse the whole thing with water, a lot of water. Covers the sacrifice, the wood, everything, and fills up the trench with water around the sacrifice. And then Elijah prays a prayer. Here's the prayer he prays. When he prayed, he said this, "Let it be known that you are God and I am your servant and have done all this at your word." Now listen, that's important. I've done all this at your word, he prays. He's letting them know this isn't his idea. This isn't a guy that's a prophet of God that thinks, here's a good idea. No, God has told him to do this. He's doing this in obedience. He's not being presumptuous on God. I've done all of this at your word. Answer that your people will know that you're God and turning their heart back again. And Scripture says that fire fell from heaven, consumed the sacrifice, and drank up all the water in the trench and everything else. It's all just gone. God consumes the sacrifice. And Scripture says that the people of Israel fell on their face before God and said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." And Elijah killed the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah. Now, there's more to the story there because God's going to now send rain, and that's good. I'm not going to go there. You can read about it in 1 Kings. But what happens is Ahab goes back to tell Jezebel. And he goes back and tells Jezebel what's happened and that the prophets of Baal have all been killed. The prophets of Asherah are killed. And listen to what Jezebel says. She sends this message back to Elijah. "May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them." Now you get the picture. Elijah's won this great battle on Mount Carmel, killed the 450 prophets of Baal and another 400, and now Jezebel says, "I'm going to kill you." One woman, one evil woman, I might add. Listen to what Elijah does. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and stayed there and prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who've already died." This incredible man of God, a godly prophet of God, anointed by God to be the prophet of Israel, has this great victory, and one woman says, "I'm going to kill you by this time tomorrow." And he's in darkness, depressed before God, saying, "God, just go ahead and kill me. I might as well just die now." How did he get there that quickly? What happened in Elijah's life for that to happen? Just a few points from this, as I'm building towards something else this morning, but just a couple of things to mention. Number one, oftentimes after the highest peaks and the greatest victory come some of the lowest valleys in our lives. We have all these expectations. Perhaps he had false expectations of what the victory at Mount Carmel meant, that things were going to be perfect from that point on, and all of a sudden it's not. But also notice, and you'll see this as I read more about his story in a minute, he's physically and emotionally exhausted. He is worn out. Now there's more to his life in the chapters before that would help explain why he's worn out and what's been going on. But in this moment, he took his eyes off God and began to look at the circumstances. Even this great prophet of God did that. He wasn't thinking clearly. That's what the darkness will do. It'll cause us not to think clearly. But the thing that's interesting to me is, here's this great prophet of God, this kind of drowning in a pool of self-pity. And you go, how did that happen? And then you'll see in the story, he isolates himself from everyone, which is the last thing he really needs to do. Now, here's the reality for a lot of people in our culture today. With all that's happened in our culture these last few years, there's a whole lot of people that are emotionally out of gas, just worn out emotionally. Tired of all the fighting, tired of all the bickering, tired of all the conflict, tired of all the stuff that's going on. And many people have stopped thinking clearly, have taken their eyes off of where they should be and put them on the circumstances of life. I want you to see how God responds to Elijah. Look what God does in Elijah's life when this happens. In verse 5 it says, so he's at that broom tree. He's praying, "God, just take me. I'm better off dead." Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. He ate and drank and he goes back to sleep again. He is exhausted. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, "Get up, eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you." There's a journey that's about to come to him. So he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength, and he traveled all the way to Mount Sinai. Your translation might say Mount Horeb, same place. And so he has this long journey all the way there. God, if you look at this, God dealt with him in a number of ways. Number one, he dealt with his physical needs. You see that? He dealt with his need for rest, for sleep. He dealt with his need for food. He provided food for him. He dealt with his emotional needs. Remember that angel, if you saw it, the angel touched him. The angel was there with him. And then look what else he did. Elijah takes this trip, and look what happens once he takes this long trip after the 2 meals, after the rest. There he came to a cave where he spent the night, but the Lord said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He goes in this cave, and God said, "What are you doing here?" And Elijah, you'll see in a minute, Elijah's feeling like he's the only prophet left. He's the only one left that's worshiping God in all of Israel. That's what he's thinking in this moment. And in verse 11 of 1 Kings 19, God says, "Go out and stand on the mountain." And when he does, God sends this strong wind across the mountain, but Scripture says God was not in the wind, and then he sends an earthquake, and it says God was not in the earthquake, and then he sends fire, and it says God is not in the fire. And then in verse 12, it says this, "And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave, and a voice said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah, why are you here? Why are you in this cave?' And it's when he cries out, 'Lord, I'm the only one left.'" Now, look what God does, and it's a great instruction for us in times of darkness, when we feel so isolated and so all alone. Number one, God gave him something to do. He says, "Get out of the cave and go anoint Hazael to be king of Aram, then anoint Jehu to be king of Israel, and anoint Elisha to replace you as my prophet." And then God lets him know he's not alone. In verse 18, he says, "Yet I will preserve 7,000 others in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal or kissed him." He said, "Elijah, you're not alone. There are 7,000 more who have not bowed down to the Baals or worshiped the Baals here as well." So what did God do? He got him out of the cave, right? Out of his isolation. God gave him his presence. God was there with him, communed with him. He gave him a job to do. He got him out of the cave and gave him something to do. He told him he wasn't alone, and he set his thinking straight. Now, here's the reality. When we're in darkness and in times of depression like Elijah was here, that's not normally the way God works, is it? I mean, that's dramatic. It's amazing, but it's not normally the way God works in your life and my life. It's just not. So I want us to see for the rest of this message, I want to be really pragmatic and see some things that we need to do in moments like this. In the 70s, I know most of you in this room are too young to remember the show, but you need to go back and watch it on YouTube or something. I bet it's there. But in the 70s, there was a sitcom called The Bob Newhart Show. And yeah, there's a few you old people laughed. The Bob Newhart Show, he played he was a comedian, if you don't know who he was. He played a therapist in this show. I think his name was Bob Hartley in the show. He played a therapist, and all these weird characters would come into his practice, and it was all the interaction with him. And one of the classic shows, a woman comes in, and her name was Catherine, and she comes in for counseling with him, and she pours out her heart and all the fears of her life to him, all kind of fears and stuff that it's causing her to do. And while she's talking, he finally just leans across the desk and says, "Stop it." And she said, "Stop it?" He said, "Yes, just stop it." And she said, "Don't you want to delve into my childhood or something?" He said, "No, we don't do that. Just stop it. Just stop doing that." And the reality is, when darkness comes, there are some things we need to stop doing. I want to share with you 3 things to stop. The rest of this outline I'm going to share with you today comes from a book by one of our other pastors, Ben Young. Ben Young preaches our 11 o'clock service at our Woodway campus on most weekends. And Ben went through a very dark time in his life, a very difficult time in his life, and it was an extended period of time. And he's written a book called Survive the Day. It's a book, it's not new, it's been out for a little while, but it's just principles and things he learned during that time of darkness, things that helped him survive each day. Sometimes it feels like getting through the day is all I can do. How do I survive the day? And so there are 3 things he says we need to stop doing. We're in these times of darkness. Here's the first one. Stop comparing. Stop comparing. This is, in our home, Josie and I talk about this one a lot. I will tell you, she will not allow me to play the comparison game. I don't like playing that game, but if I ever even say something that sounds like it's going to be a comparison, she slams the door on that quick. There's none of that. Here's the deal about playing the comparison game. Nobody wins the comparison game. Nobody. There are only losers in the comparison game. You may be going through a great physical illness. You may be going through a financial crisis. You may be going through a relationship crisis. Students, you may be going through a difficult time as a student. Maybe it's in your academics. Maybe it's in friendships at school. Maybe it's in sports. Whatever it might be. It can be in all kinds of areas. But looking around at friends or other people that we know, regardless of our age, students, grown-up adults, regardless of our age, looking at other people and say, well, why don't they have the physical issues I have to deal with? Why don't they have the financial issues I have to deal with? Why don't they have the relationship issues? Why is life this hard for me? Why is it like this? And you play that comparison game, and you will not win that game. You will lose every single time. You say, well, life seems so unfair. Yeah, it is. Sometimes life's really brutal, isn't it? But the comparison game is not going to help you deal with your darkness. It's going to make it worse. It's not going to make it better. Your struggle is your struggle. It is yours. And God can use it in your life. God can use my struggles in my life, but the comparison game will not help you deal with those things. And so Bob Newhart says to you, stop it. I mean, seriously, isn't social media all about playing the comparison game? I don't care what you had for lunch yesterday. I don't feel worse about my lunch because of what you had. I had a corn dog yesterday. I don't care what you had. Is it going to make me feel better if I had a better lunch than you? Seriously. No, that's a little small. But I mean, what about things that are serious in life? And so much of the internet, so much of social media is comparing what I have in my post to your post and how my followers do. How ridiculous. It will not help you with the darkness that you experience in your life. It won't help you survive the day. President Theodore Roosevelt said this. This is a great quote. He said, comparison is the thief of joy. And it is. Comparison is the thief of joy. You play the comparison game, you will not win, and it will rob you of your joy. No one wins the comparison game, so stop it. So will you say that with me about the comparison game? One more time. All right, there you go. Here's the second one. Stop complaining. Stop complaining. When you're faced with circumstances, difficult circumstances, it's awful easy to fixate on your circumstances, isn't it? And you just think about your circumstances and the difficulties of your life all the time, and what begins to happen if you just do that? You begin to pour out your heart to people around you and complain to the people around you about the circumstances of your life. And all of your posts and all of your texting and all of your conversations, it's complaining about the circumstances of your life. Listen, no one, I'm not trying to be harsh to anyone if this is you, but no one wants to be around someone that's complaining all the time. It sucks the life right out of the people that are hearing the complaining all the time. And it's not going to help you survive the day. It's not going to help you survive the darkness that you're in. If you're always complaining to the same people over and over and over again, sooner or later you're going to find yourself alone and isolated from other people, because people don't want to be around that all the time. What do? There's a place to go and complain. In the first 6 chapters of Psalm, it became very clear, didn't it? What did David do? David complained, but where did he complain? To God. He was honest with God and poured his heart out to God. You go to God and you pour your heart out to him, and you say anything you need and want to say to God. And if you need to complain to a person, I'm not saying bottle this stuff in and hold it, but find a godly Christian counselor and pour your heart out and complaints out to them. Find a support group that fits whatever it is you're going through. But stop making your family and your friends a 911 emergency place to call and complain every time you have a moment where you're down. Because if you do that, you will find yourself isolated and you'll find yourself alone. And here's the third thing. Stop caving. Now, I need to explain this one a little bit. That can be a little bit confusing. In his book, Ben talks about the time in his life when his life fell apart. I want to read you a quote. This is something he said in his book. He said, "I wanted to isolate myself from others and especially social gatherings. I wanted to stay home and skip church because I felt like a leper. When dealing with an ongoing life storm, it's so easy to want to retreat into your cave." That's the kind of caving he's talking about, recruiting or withdrawing into your cave. We saw it in Elijah. And what did God say to Elijah? "Elijah, what are you doing here?" And God helped him and he called him out of the cave and he gave him something to do and told him he wasn't alone. You were not created to go into a cave and be alone. You were created for community. And you and I, all of us, need community. We need brothers and sisters in times of darkness and all times. And so in the words of Bob Newhart, just stop it. Stop caving. So look at these three things. I want to just look at the three with you. And then as I read each one, after I say it, will you just say, stop it? Will you do that with me? Stop comparing. Stop complaining. Stop caving. See the picture? When you're in darkness, when you're depressed, when you're down, maybe a little, maybe a lot, these are things we need to stop doing. But there's some things we need to start doing too. And they're really simple, but it's really important. The first one is start thanking. Start thanking. Have a thankful heart. Have you ever noticed, if you read the New Testament much, have you ever noticed how thankful the Apostle Paul is? Now, the Apostle Paul went through unbelievable difficulties in his life. When he came to Christ, he faced so much stuff. You go read 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and there's a whole section in there of the things he went through. How many times he was beaten and shipwrecked and all these different things. He even had this thorn in the flesh that God never removed from his life, but yet he had a life filled with thankfulness. In fact, he wrote this. This is one of the most popular things he wrote, if you will, in Philippians 4. He said, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." He's saying the secret to this is thanksgiving. Have a thankful heart. When you're in times of darkness, make sure, don't miss stopping and thanking God for life and who you are and how he made you and the things around you, for the bed you slept in the night before, for all the things God provides. Every good gift comes from him. And so we're to have thankful hearts. The art of living thankfully gives us the power and the perspective to make it through those dark times. So start thanking. Here's the second one, start caring. It's so easy when life is hard to turn inward. I've already said that, but when we turn inward, the reality is we can turn inward and be so inward focused that we stop caring and demonstrating that caring for other people. And that caring comes in a couple of different forms. It comes in spontaneous acts. You know, things that God just brings into our life. And it gives us a chance to operate and show caring for other people. Sometimes it's long-term caring when people are facing something where there has to be a long-term caring for them. It could be either one of those. I want to tell you a story, and some of you have heard this story before, potentially. It's a very well-known story. Josie and I heard it told live and in person many years ago at one of our pro athletes conferences. But there was a guy, he was a sociologist named Tony Campolo. Some of you have probably heard of him. Tony was a character. He was a sociologist and a preacher, which is a weird combination. He was a professor, and he did all kind of great stuff. He was real active in Haiti and in some of the poorest parts of Haiti, administering to and caring for people there. And he spoke all over the world, but he had been invited to Honolulu, Hawaii to speak at a conference. And he flew to Honolulu, and he got there, and the time zones, he was messed up. It's 3:30 in the morning, and he is wide awake. And he's hungry, so he leaves the hotel where he's staying and goes out to a diner. And he's sitting down, and a table full of women walk in, prostitutes walk in and sit at the table next to Tony Campolo. And Campolo is not shy. There's nothing shy about him. And this table full of prostitutes sit down, and he hears them talking. And one of them's name is Agnes. And he hears Agnes say to the other girls, "Tomorrow is my birthday." And they all begin to get on her like, "Yeah, why do we care? Tomorrow's your birthday." And she said, "Well, I wasn't making a big deal out of it. It's not like I wanted a party or something. I've never had a party in my life. Why would I want one now?" Well, Campolo hears this, and the girls leave. And Campolo goes up to the manager of the diner and he says, do those girls come in here often? And he said, they come in here every night. And Campolo says, how about if we throw Agnes a surprise party tomorrow night? And the guy says, that's a good idea. And so Campolo goes back at 2 o'clock the next morning and helps this manager of this diner decorate the diner, gets a cake made for her the next day and brings it. And there's a cake for Agnes and the place is decorated. And when the girls walk in and Agnes walks in, it's a surprise birthday party for Agnes. And Campolo said, here's this girl, Agnes. She's shocked, and in fact, she's crying. Now picture who she is in her life. And it brings her to tears. In fact, Campolo says she was so taken back, she'd never had a cake. She said, I'm not leaving this cake here. I'm taking this cake home. And she leaves with the cake and leaves all the other girls there. And Campolo says, here I am in this situation. I don't know what to do. He said, I'm feeling kind of awkward with all these other girls, these prostitutes that are there. And so he has them all hold hands with the manager of the diner, and here's Campolo and these girls are all holding hands. And he said, so I prayed. And I prayed for Agnes, and I prayed for these girls, and prayed the prayer, and he said, I finished, and the manager of the diner said, you didn't tell me you were a preacher. What kind of church are you a preacher in? He said, I'm a preacher in the kind of church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 2 in the morning. Caring. Start caring for people. I mean, we have opportunities around us all the time and we miss them. We put our blinders on. I hate to think of how often I miss. And I miss way too often. I had one the other. I got one right the other day. I'm gonna brag on what I got right because I missed 99 and I might get one right. But this is how often, how simple they are. Sometimes they're that quick. I had a stress test recently. I do that every year, and I'm leaving the parking garage in the medical center. And there's 2 places you can get out. There's 2 different places. But you got the little gate there, and there's nobody there. And I noticed a guy in a car on the other gate just sitting there, and he was walking around. He was all frantic, and you could tell he was frantic. And I got up, and I paid for mine, and I pulled up, and I see him just, and so I stopped, and I got out, and I went back, and I said, are you okay? He said, I can't, and I think I mentioned the car was old and beat up, and he said, I can't get out. I said, what's wrong? He said, you have to have a credit card. I said, you don't have a credit card. He said, no, I've got cash and they don't take cash. And so I went back. I said, okay, it's okay, get in your car. And I went back and I just put my card in and got it done. And he had his window down. And I leaned into his window and I said, I just want you to know something. Jesus really does love you. He really does love you. Now, how hard was that? Seriously. It took me, 30 seconds, maybe a minute out of my life? Seriously? You know how often I miss those? Almost every time. Almost every time I miss them. And God, what if all of us, look around this room, how many people we have in this church family? What if all of us took the blinders off and we started caring everywhere we went all the time? On the spur of the moment, but even in a more difficult way, in long-term moments where people need more long-term caring. Start caring. And then finally, the last one's very much like that, and it's start serving. Start serving. If you research the cures, the responses to depression and darkness that people talk about, there are all kind of theories, there are all kind of thoughts. But the 2 things I'm about to mention to you, almost everybody agrees these are good things to do. There's almost no one that disagrees with these 2 things. The first one is this, and you see it in how God dealt with Elijah. The first one is when you're in times of darkness and depression, go outside and go for a walk. Get out and do something. Just get out and go for a walk. In other words, take care of your physical needs. So important. But secondly, is start serving in some capacity. Look outside of yourself and look to others and find a way to start serving other people. As long as we're turned inward and just inward, we're going to deal with all those other issues we've talked about this morning. But we need to look outside of ourselves and start serving. And the absolute ultimate act of humility and of service was when Jesus left his home in glory and came as a baby in a manger and gave himself for us. We celebrated the Lord's Supper a little while ago. I mentioned the upper room and that last Passover meal. You know what else happened that night? Jesus took the towel, God in the flesh, took the towel and washed the feet of his disciples. Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve and to give my life a ransom for many. He is the ultimate example of how we're to serve other people. And God intends for us to follow Jesus' example. So let me leave you with two things. First is just something you can do if you want to do this. Ben did not ask me to do this. I called Ben this week and asked him for permission to use this outline at the end of the message because I thought it was so good. It's in one of the chapters of his book, Survive the Day. So I had Woodway Campus send me some of his books. They're right out that door today. If you want to buy one on the way out, they're $15 for a hardback book. Ben doesn't get any of the money, so we're not selling Ben's book. He doesn't get a penny of this money. It's going to the church, so don't sweat that. But if you want help, if you want to know how to survive the day, you're struggling, you've been walking through darkness, you want to make it through it, I would encourage you to get Ben's book and read it. It's very practical, and it comes out of that time in his life where he faced the same kind of thing. Maybe you want to buy it for somebody else. That's great. But here's the second thing. I just want to recap where we've been the last 2 weeks. No great illustration, no big example, but just think about where we've been. Here it is in a nutshell. All of us will face times of darkness, of anguish, perhaps even what the world would call today depression. But when we do, in the darkest of times, even in the darkest of times, we can trust God's heart. Even when you don't feel him there, just like David in Psalm 6 we saw last week. Even when you don't feel he's there, you can call out to Yahweh, the God who keeps his promises, even when you don't feel him. Because even though we don't keep our promises always, he always keeps his promises. But in times of darkness, listen, stop comparing. It's not going to get you out of the darkness. Stop complaining. It's not going to get you out of the darkness. Stop caving. Stop isolating yourself from people around you. It will not get you out of the darkness of your life. But start thanking. Start being thankful to God for all the things you have in your life. Start caring. Start demonstrating caring for other people. And start serving. And I can't promise you begin to practice those things this week. Stop these things and start these 3 things this week. I can't promise you all of a sudden next week you're coming out of the darkness totally. What I can promise you is that as you walk through the darkness with your eyes fixed on him, on Jesus, calling out to Yahweh, the God who keeps his promises, that he will help you through the darkness, and eventually you will make it through the darkness and into, as his word says, his marvelous light. So stop it and start it, and he will see you through.